So let me just touch on this war issues. The war issues are a huge problem. And part of the huge problem is the expectation that the United States has to control all of its interests. And then once we've made a mess, we only have military solutions for the mess we've made. And the anguish of our nation and the anguish of people in other nations is huge. At the 8 o'clock service, when we were asked, are there something we're concerned about? One of my big concerns is the Iraqi Dominican sisters who had to flee Mosul ahead of ISIS, and then they had to flee Karakush to Erbil, where they now have in a school, an 8-room school with one bathroom. Well, I guess it's a boys' and girls' bathroom. They have 1,500 people, internally displaced Iraqis, who are the religious minorities. Now, for all of the horrible things Saddam Hussein did to his political enemies, he protected religious minorities, and they were part of the government of Iraq. If you were a Ba'athist, it was parties. It was like being a Republican or a Democrat, but they were brutal to political enemies, that's true. But it was political enemies. They had a working, functioning society, which they don't have now. And so the anguish of the Iraqi Dominican sisters is trying to minister to their people in these horrible adverse circumstances. The same thing is happening in Syria right now. When we were I was in Damascus in 2008 with the Good Shepherd Sisters, the Daughters of Charity. Who else did we see? We saw another community that was a local community. I forget their names. Anyway, the Good Shepherd Sisters had I don't know if they still do, the first shelter for abused women in the Middle East. They had a hotline for abused women to respond to their needs. And President Assad had given them the money to do this work. And he held them up in the Middle East as being a fabulous step forward. It is true that he too is repressive of political enemies. But he's also supportive of women and religious minorities. So the piece that gets missed in our rhetoric is that complex intersection of analysis of what's going on, and that there are alternatives. There are alternatives. And I applaud President Obama trying, like mad, to do diplomacy and development to respond to the displaced folks. But one of the big problems is Congress won't vote him enough money for the State Department. Congress won't vote enough money for USAID to deal with the refugees and internally displaced. So sometimes there does need to be a military response. I'm not a total pacifist, but too often we think we only have the military. So what we're proposing or trying to encourage is that we have more options as a nation, that we think of diplomacy, we think of aid, we think of multilateral conversations, and that in that way we can get more of the complexity. And that the 21st century on our very small blue planet, we'd better figure out how we can talk to each other.